Cloverfield is one of those things that I never would have gotten into if I hadn't bought it on DVD. I'm so fucking glad that I did find out about this franchise because I love the first 2 movies with every fiber of my being. So yeah, let's just hop into the review. Since this is found footage, there isn't really a single piece of original score in it until the credits. That's part of why the film feels so realistic and jarring. They use a lot of found footage elements in it, damn near perfectly. They really polish them and make them pretty much, you know, amazing. I know a lot of people don't really fuck with found footage because of the shaky cam and stuff, but I really like it. Despite this movie feeling so real, a lot of different lines and actions from different people in like the first 20 minutes feel fake as hell. Everything about this movie can be a documentary. Like if someone were to come up to me and tell me like, oh yeah, this is a real thing from another dimension, I would maybe ponder for a second, but then be like, oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. It feels so legit, it's insane. It feels so real, like it's something you're actually experiencing. That it's insane. I'm not sure if they did this on purpose or not, but the footage looks really grainy, and it's something that that makes it look like it actually came from a real camcorder from 2007. Well, that's because a lot of it really did. They shot a lot of the film on about 3 or 4 different cameras. Some of them were real cheap camcorders from the store. Like, actually look up what was Cloverfield shot on, and you'll see a bunch of different camcorders. But they did actually use like a real cinema camera for a couple of the scenes, so I don't know which ones were shot with cinema cameras and which ones were shot with a regular camcorder, but it doesn't really matter because it all looks the same. The copy of the movie I watched was in 16:9, but I've seen versions of the film in widescreen before. They released it in a bunch of different formats, but the one I watched was a copy from the Blu-ray, which was in 16:9, and I really like that because I prefer full screen movies a lot because that adds to the found footage feeling in a lot of movies, and it fills up your vision more and stuff like that. Due to there being no music, when something loud happens, like Clover screaming or something like that, it's very jarring and seems a lot louder and more scary than it really is. Clover is the name that the production team who were working on the movie named the monster in the movie, by the way. So if you hear me talking about Clover, then just know that I'm talking about the monster. So since there's no music, pretty much everything that happens in the movie is basically a jump scare. So I found myself always kind of wound up tight waiting for Clover to do something or something crazy to happen, which makes the movie very scary when something actually does happen. The acting really shines after the 20-minute mark because that's when Clover shows up. Beforehand, the acting is alright, but it's not like top tier like it is for the rest of the film. Like I said, a lot of like the opening scene feels really fake. Like there's some scenes, like there's a scene like in around like 17 minutes or so when they're at the party at the house, and HUD, who films most of the movie, goes up to somebody and he's doing testimonials, kind of like a wedding. And he goes up to somebody and was like, hey, you want to do a testimonial? And they look up in such a stupid fucking way, and it looks so fake. It's really hard to explain. I'll try to find the clip and put it in here. But she looks up in such a stupid way. And it's just little stuff like that that makes the movie feel kind of fake and kind of throws you out of the immersion. But it's mostly in the opening scene, and it's not really present from the 20-minute mark onward. If you don't really know if you don't know the history of Cloverfield, let me break it down to you. So essentially, the internet. That's pretty much it. So it's kind of like the Blair Witch, the way where the movie pretty much, the reason why the movie was so successful is because it had a really good viral marketing campaign, and part of that viral marketing campaign was an ARG. If you don't know what an ARG is, it's an alternate reality game. It's kind of like a treasure hunt that spans usually like the internet and real life and phone calls and all that. And so an ARG is basically like a treasure hunt, except there's no treasure. It's kind of just like insane people finding stuff for fun. And this one had a huge ARG. Well, it wasn't huge, but it was relatively big, and I know a lot about it. I thoroughly recommend watching the movie first, for the first time without any previous knowledge whatsoever, and then watching a video about the ARG. I'll link one in the description. Watching a video about the ARG, finding out everything you can about the ARG, and then watch the movie again, because when you watch the movie for the second time with knowledge about the ARG, there's all these little hints and little specks and stuff that hint to the ARG, and it's like gratification for people who wasted their time on the ARG. So, yeah, just a fun little thought there. It's super fun to point out all the little things that are in the ARG, like that dead white girl on the couch. You'll understand what that means once you go watch the video. I know that seems insane right now, but you'll understand later. By far, the worst thing about this movie is all the goofy-ass product placement everywhere. There's a scene right after the main character's brother dies, and he's crying and it's emotional, and one of the main characters is comforting him and stuff, and it's such like an emotional scene, and they're sitting on the floor, and it's beautiful. If it weren't for the huge fucking Nokia logo that they sit directly behind, Nokia is very clearly orchestrating the production of this film. They clearly shout out about $500 million in product placement for the film. Nokia is everywhere. But that's beside the point. The reason why I love this movie so much is it's because it's quite simple, really. It's just a scary film. It's scary, it's unique, it's found footage kaiju horror. Like, what? It's such an unlikely genre mix, and I love it. And I also love its sorta sequel, blood relative, spin-off movie, 10 Cloverfield Lane. So the production story to this is actually really, really weird. So at first this was never supposed to be a Cloverfield movie. It was originally an ultra low budget spec script called The Cellar, and nobody really knew that it was gonna be a Cloverfield movie, even when they were making it. Apparently not that much was changed somehow, like at all. There is so much fucking confusion about how the hell this movie became a Cloverfield film, so I really couldn't find that much information that was 100% concrete and that was, that wasn't conflicting other information that I heard. But it was just it's so strange, the production of this film. So I'm not gonna really, give down a breakdown of how this became a Cloverfield film. But yeah, let's just get into the picture itself. Straight from the opening, it's different from the first film. The first movie had no music at all, but then 10 Cloverfield Lane, from the get-go, from the opening, is about 5 minutes of nothing but music. In fact, the music in the film is a big part of the soul and tone of it. The composer, I'm not gonna try to pronounce his name because I already know that I'm gonna be embarrassed, but he can make some fucking music. He's the same guy who did God of War 4 and of God of War 5, Ragnarok, and 2018. He did both of those games, so he can do some music. Let's keep it $150. That man can compose. This score is one of my favorites of all time, and I think it's one of the best I've ever listened to. It isn't your usual all up in your face horror music that you know and love. It's different. It's a lot smoother to the ears. Normal, usual horror music is a lot like chili, like, the food. It's all, it hurts. It's loud. It's all up in your face. The score for 10 Lane, on the other hand, is like a Del Pepper. It's nicer to the palate, being easier to digest and include into some calmer scenes and dishes. You know what I'm saying? It's calm and it's great, and I love the score to my core. I ain't no music critic, but this shit is it. I love this score. Now let's move on to the stuff that you can, actually see with your eyes, which is, very nice. The film is shot beautifully, and the color grading is great. The production design of the bunker is really, really cool. It was all built on a soundstage, and they all filmed it on a soundstage. So they had full control over what the bunker looked like, and it's really cool and unique looking. It looks like something that Howard would actually build. Just like the first film, there was an ARG to accompany the promotion of this film. I know a lot about this ARG too, and I might like it better than the first Cloverfield movie, but it's nowhere near as long and as interesting, but I still like the themes of it more. But it wasn't anything too crazy, but it was still cool. I know a lot of people say this in every review for this film, but John Goodman can act. He knocks it out of the park with his performance. Everything he says has something very slightly off about it, like the tone or the phrasing or some shit, and it adds to the really, 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 really suspenseful, intense feeling of this movie. I have never felt so uncomfortable during a film in my entire existence. That one scene at the dinner table near like the halfway mark, that's some suspense. That is some suspense right there. I know a lot of people don't really like the twist ending and find it to be the point where the film drops off in quality, but I think the exact opposite. I love the twist, and it's my favorite twist in a movie of all time. However, most of the film does take place in a bunker in one location with only 3 characters, which is part of the reason why the movie is so unique and interesting to me, is that it's kind of like Saw, like the first Saw film, where it was created under the idea of it being a super micro budget production, but then it ended up getting a decent budget and a big budget, and it ended up getting picked up by a big studio, and so it ended up flourishing into this beautiful, unique piece of art. This film is a very good place to look to when you're trying to convince someone that you don't need a lot of characters in a movie in order to make it good or entertaining. You can legitimately have fucking 3 people in a little bunker and create one of the greatest horror films I've ever seen. Part of why this movie is so good to me is because of the mystery as to whether or not Howard is a killer. At some points you think that maybe he is, and then a couple minutes later you're 100% sure of it, and then the next minute later you're not sure of it, and then the next you are, and then it's a roller coaster of a film. I'd love to see a lot more horror set in Louisiana because it's usually banging, you know, RE7, and this pretty much the only horror things I've ever, you know, indulged in that take place in Louisiana. I think Southern horror is kind of cool. Like I said in my X review, I'm gonna start getting more into Southern horror because it's kind of rad, I guess. I don't fucking know. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. Now, granted, that list is, you know, pretty much as long as the Bible, but it's like top 10 maybe, and that's saying a lot. It's top 10 of my favorite movies of all time. I love it to my core. I need to get it on 4K. 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray. I gotta get this movie on 4K and then watch it in 4K, but it's almost as good as the first one. That's how good it is. Well, it might even be better than the first one. I'm not entirely certain. I can't decide. It's like trying to pick my favorite kid. I just can't do it. Now, I cannot believe that this is the director's first film. The director who made this, it's his first ever movie. Like, that's mind-blowing to me. Kind of like how the author of Ready Player One, that was his first book. Kind of nuts. It's insane to think how real beginner's luck can be sometimes. But anyways, let's check out the third and final film, The Cloverfield Paradox. Yikes. Alright, so this one is a bit of a doozy. I'm not going to talk too much about the behind the scenes of this one because it's not that interesting and I didn't bother to look up that much about it. I watched like one documentary and that was pretty much it. I'm going to start with the positive of this film, then I'm going to move on to the negative slowly. I'm going to seep the negative into the review slowly. Alright, let's hit it. I like the idea of the main plot of the movie taking place up in the sky in space, and then the B plot, or the secondary plot in the film, taking place on Earth. That's pretty cool. I am 99.9% certain that that entire B plot is just for the ending. Like, they set up that entire character and then they brought in the kid and did that whole thing. I'm 80% certain that they did that whole thing just for the ending. Like, just for like the last, like, what is it, 30 seconds of the film, just for that. I think they set up that whole thing just for that, but despite that, I still like the B-plot. The editing of the film is great somehow, and it makes the movie feel refreshing. Now, this ARG I have absolutely no knowledge of. As far as I'm concerned, it barely existed, so there isn't much online about it. Despite not really having an ARG of its own, it still has a bunch of different hints to the ARGs of the past, which kind of feels like a tease that never really goes anywhere. The humor feels really forced and kind of stupid sometimes. It's still kind of funny, but it's not that good at all. Every Clover film has someone who's funny. If you haven't noticed, there was HUD in the first film. There was what's his face? There was Emmett in the second one, and then now there's that guy who loses his arm in this one. This time around, though, with the comedic interest, it doesn't really. It feels plastic, you know, it feels cheap. There's still some funny moments in this, but it's not that, it kind of feels stupid and forced sometimes. It feels out of place. The pacing of this movie feels a lot like a slasher film. There being a kill every a certain amount of time leading up to, you know, the third act, which is the big culmination of it all. And I feel like this one focuses way too much on that. It focuses way too much on the kills and the sci-fi and less on the kaiju horror action from the previous two films, which is why it feels nothing like the previous two and why it's kind of hated. The score is better than the movie, being made by the same person who made the score for 10 Lane. Just go listen to it, it's banging. The effects are actually decent, they're pretty good. They're nothing looks too fake, mostly because it's Netflix and CG, and Netflix more or less doesn't rush their CG artists, I think. I don't know. The effects look decent. It's nothing too fake, or it's nothing too shitty. It looks decent. The whole thing where the main weapon, like, they have like one weapon that they use throughout this entire movie, and it's a 3D printed gun, and that's kind of stupid because you can't just like type a prompt into a computer to 3D print something. You have to have a 3D model of it in order to print it out, so that means that they had the 3D model for this gun. And it's like, why did they have that 3D model on this ship for a gun to 3D print it? It's a 3D printer for food, which doesn't make any sense. But the whole 3D printing and the whole 3D printing a gun plot was really stupid. They could have just had a gun for emergencies and then just used that. They didn't have to have this whole 3D printing plot. I don't know, kind of just a notice that I noticed. I'm not saying that 3D printing a gun isn't feasible. No, you can 3D print a gun. I'm not giving you illegal advice here, but it is possible to 3D print a fully working gun, but it's just that, like I said, you have to have a 3D model for everything, and So that's kind of a plot hole in this movie. And like I said before, I love the twist endings in the Cloverfield movies, and I love twist endings in general, if that wasn't already apparent. So the ending to this bad boy is pretty much the best part of the film. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. A bigger, more grown version of the monster from the first movie shows up at the end of this one, so it's like a little bump to the fans to tell them like, hey yo, you're not insane, these movies are connected. I think the greenish kind of color palette from like the posters and a couple of the scenes in the first two movies are completely it's completely abandoned here, which sucks because I really liked that kind of Grove Street color type shit from the posters and a couple of the scenes from the first two movies, and they're not existent here. They added some green to like the Blu-ray poster, but that's pretty much it. So this movie, it was alright. The script for this movie existed before 10 Cloverfield Lane did. Some of the actors who are in this movie read the script for the Cloverfield Paradox before 10 Cloverfield Lane existed. Their production to the Cloverfield sequels is a fucking mess, but essentially, it's an alright movie. It barely feels like a Cloverfield film, but it's alright. It's fine. It's watchable, but it's nowhere near as good as the first two. This is a tad bit overhated. The movie is a tad bit overhated, but it's still a bad film. I still didn't love it. It was alright. It was nothing even remotely worthy of touching the first two films, but, you know, it's a decent film. It's alright. It's a bad film, but it's a decent bad film. Alright, I think that's about it. That's all I got in terms of the Cloverfield movies. I am sweating like hell because my room is fucking 9,000 degrees, and I've been recording for like an hour, and so I am dying. I am sweating like a motherfucker, but anyways, that's it. I'll smell you later.